He was born in a Bedouin tent, came to power in a coup, and for more than 40 years, Muammar Gaddafi has stood as one of the most bizarre characters on the world stage.
In modern history, few figures have provoked as much controversy and intrigue as Muammar Gaddafi. Hailed as a visionary by some and criticized as a dictator by others, his legacy is as complex as the dark times he lived in.
Colonel Gaddafi, the President of the United States, the leaders of Britain and other leaders are calling on you to step down, to leave Libya, to leave your position of power. Will you do that?
But it was on one fateful day, amidst the chaos and uncertainty of the Arab Spring, that Gaddafi delivered a speech that would not only seal his fate, but spread across the globe.
You came to power in Libya in 1969. Long time ago. Do you have thoughts on who might succeed you?
What secrets did his final address hold? And perhaps most importantly, what legacy did he leave behind? Join us as we go deeper into the shocking details of Muammar Gaddafi's last speech and just how they might hold clues to why he was executed. Number 1. The dictator's bizarre transformation. After World War II, Libya found itself divided between France and the United Kingdom. These nations governed Libya alongside their colonies in nearby Algeria and Tunisia. The UK favored setting up a monarchy, controlled by the Senussi dynasty and backed by Saudi Arabia and the UN. King Idrissa was the first ruler under this setup, but his reign kept Libya relatively unknown while serving British interests. Despite the discovery of oil in 1959, the Libyan people saw few benefits. Political analyst Tir Massan noted that under the monarchy, Libya struggled with education, healthcare, housing, and social security. Shockingly, only a small fraction of the population could read and write by 1969. Everything changed when Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi led a coup, overthrowing the Senussi dynasty and declaring true independence for Libya. Gaddafi's government immediately focused on sharing wealth and resources equally among all Libyans. Oil became central to the nation's economy under the Libyan Arab Republic, fueling ambitious plans for progress. Gaddafi's policies emphasized economic self-reliance, including the nationalization of Western oil companies like British Petroleum, BP, and the establishment of the National Oil Corporation, NOC. These moves shifted Libya towards socialism and spurred extensive social programs covering education, healthcare, housing, and infrastructure. By 2011, Libya had transformed from one of Africa's poorest nations in 1969 to a leader in human development on the continent. Gaddafi's initiatives, such as free electricity, interest-free loans, and support for home ownership, drastically improved living standards. Education and healthcare became accessible to all, with the literacy rate soaring and farming supported by government funding. Additionally, the government subsidized half the cost of new cars, further easing financial burdens on the populace. In Libya, if someone wanted to buy their first car, they didn't have to worry much about the petrol price, which was only about 14 cents per liter. Libya also boasted of having no external debt, and reserves amounting to a whopping $150 billion. What's more, if you were a Libyan citizen who earns a degree but struggles to find work, the government stepped in to support you financially until you landed a job. When it came to education, the sale of Libyan oil directly contributed to the bank accounts of all Libyan citizens, ensuring everyone benefited. Starting a family brought its own rewards. You received $5,000 from the government when a new baby arrived to help with the expenses of raising a child. Plus, staple foods like bread were incredibly affordable, with 40 loaves costing just 15 cents. Despite these impressive statistics, only 25% of Libyans hold a university degree. Considering these facts, it's worth pondering whether Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was truly a bad leader. In his famous speech at the 64th United Nations General Assembly in 2009, Gaddafi raised thought-provoking points about global challenges. Number 2. a controversy of the UN's power dynamics. Gaddafi started by praising President Obama for participating in the General Assembly, as his country was hosting this important meeting. He emphasized the need for unity in facing the numerous challenges we all confront. These challenges include climate change, economic downturns, food and water shortages, terrorism, and more. Gaddafi even speculated about the origins of certain viruses, suggesting that some may have been created for military purposes but escaped from labs. He then delved into the history of the United Nations, highlighting its formation during World War II by a few powerful nations. He criticized the unequal distribution of power within the organization, particularly the permanent seats in the Security Council and the veto power granted to select members. Furthermore, he argued that these arrangements contradict the principle of equality outlined in the UN Charter. Gaddafi openly expressed discontent with the discrepancy between the noble aspirations expressed in the Charter's preamble and the actual practices of the organization. He rejected the notion that some nations have more rights or privileges than others, and called for a re-evaluation of the UN structure to better reflect the principles of equality and cooperation. He emphasized that the UN Charter strictly states that military force should only be used when it benefits all nations. However, since the UN's inception, there have been a staggering 65 wars, causing immense suffering far surpassing even the Second World War. These conflicts were not fought for the common good, but served the interests of a few nations, rather than the entire global community. He also questioned whether these wars truly served the interests of all nations, as claimed by the Charter, or if they were driven by the agendas of a select few. This blatant contradiction undermines the very principles the UN was founded upon. Gaddafi advocated for adherence to the Charter's principles, warning against diplomatic niceties when the future of the world is at stake. According to the Charter's preamble, any use of armed forces should be under the banner of the United Nations as a collective decision, not the unilateral action of a few powerful nations. Gaddafi proposed that the UN intervene in conflicts to maintain international peace and security, regardless of the aggressor. He stressed that every nation's sovereignty should be respected and protected by the collective responsibility of the UN. Despite these principles, 65 wars have occurred without UN intervention, and powerful nations with veto powers have initiated conflicts resulting in millions of casualties. This hypocrisy undermines the UN's mission of peace and security. Gaddafi reaffirmed the principle of non-interference in a nation's internal affairs, asserting that no country, regardless of its political system, should face external interference or aggression. Gaddafi argued that the responsibility for governing lies within each society and should not be interfered with externally. He drew a historical parallel to ancient Rome, where leaders like Julius Caesar were appointed as dictators by the Senate for the benefit of Rome. This shows that internal affairs are decided by the people of the country themselves without external interference. He criticized the unfair power dynamics within the UN, particularly in the Security Council, where permanent members have the privilege of veto power. Gaddafi questioned how these permanent members were selected, pointing out that 4 of them bestowed this status upon themselves. He praised China's democratic election to permanent membership, but denounced the undemocratic imposition of other permanent seats against the will of many nations. Gaddafi opposed any expansion of permanent seats in the Security Council, arguing that it would only exacerbate existing power imbalances and lead to more inequality. He warned that adding more powerful countries would overshadow the voices of smaller, vulnerable nations, such as those in the Group of 100. This would further widen the gap between powerful nations and smaller states, leading to increased poverty, injustice, and global tension. He listed numerous countries that would vie for a seat on the Security Council, illustrating the impracticality of expanding its membership. Adding more seats would not only make decision-making cumbersome, but also intensify competition among countries. Gaddafi strongly rejected this proposal, advocating for the preservation of the Security Council's current structure to prevent further discord and imbalance in global governance. Gaddafi boldly proposed a solution to the UN's governance issues. Number 3. Gaddafi's outrageous vision for UN reform. The dictator suggested that the General Assembly, under Mr. Trekki's leadership, should pass a binding resolution based on the majority will of its members. This resolution would close membership in the Security Council to prevent the admission of more states. He emphasized the importance of focusing on democracy and equality among member states. He argued against increasing the number of state members in the Security Council, as it would lead to conflicts and imbalance. For example, if Germany were given a seat, Italy might object due to historical reasons, and similar tensions could arise between India and Pakistan. He highlighted the importance of considering the perspectives of all nations, including those like Libya, which have contributed to world security by renouncing weapons of mass destruction. Gaddafi proposed transferring the powers of the Security Council to the General Assembly, which would act as the world's legislative body. He stressed that the decisions of the General Assembly should be binding for all member states. He criticized the current situation where the Security Council's recommendations hold more weight than the decisions of the General Assembly, which represents all 192 member countries. He questioned the fairness of a system where global peace and security are controlled by just 5 countries in the Security Council, while the rest of the world's nations have less influence. Gaddafi advocated for a more democratic and inclusive approach to decision-making within the UN, where all member states have an equal say in shaping global policies. Gaddafi likened the United Nations to Speaker's Corner in London's Hyde Park, where people speak, but their words often go unheard and unheeded. He lamented that the UN, with its 192 member nations, is like a gathering of speakers who make speeches but lack real authority or influence. He emphasized the need for substantive change, proposing that once the Security Council becomes solely responsible for implementing decisions made by the General Assembly, there would be no need for competition for membership. He suggested a restructuring of the Security Council to better represent all nations. This would include granting permanent seats to various regional unions and groups of countries, such as the European Union, the African Union, and others. He acknowledged the existing permanent members, like the United States and Russia, while advocating for additional representation from other regions. Gaddafi proposed permanent seats for groups like the Southern African Development Community, SADC, the Arab League, the Islamic Conference, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the Group of 100. He even suggested rotating permanent seats among smaller countries not included in these unions, ensuring broader representation and inclusivity within the Security Council. Gaddafi pondered over countries like Japan and Australia, which are not part of regional organizations like ASEAN, or the Russian Federation, which isn't affiliated with the European, Latin American, or African unions. He suggested that granting them membership in the Security Council through these broader unions could be a solution. He emphasized the significance of this issue, portraying the General Assembly as the world's Congress and Parliament, its leader representing the nations. Anyone outside this assembly, he argued, wouldn't be acknowledged. He assigned the task of drafting a legal proposal to the Assembly's president, Mr. Ali Abdus Salam Trey, and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. He envisioned a Security Council composed of these broader union groups, aiming for fairness and democracy. Gaddafi outrightly condemned the current Security Council setup, where nations are chosen based on nuclear capabilities or economic power, as a form of terrorism. He insisted that all Security Council members should have veto power or none at all. Under the proposed changes, the Security Council would become an executive body controlled by the General Assembly, ensuring equal treatment for all nations. He outrightly rejected the current disparities in veto power and permanent seats, advocating for equality in both the Assembly and the Council, and urged for a rejection of any resolutions passed by the current Security Council composition. Gaddafi fearlessly spoke about colonialism in all its shapes and sizes. Number 4. Shaping a fair and democratic future. We used to be controlled by others, like when a country takes over another country. But now, we're free, said Gaddafi passionately. Today, we're gathered here to shape the future of the world together, fairly and democratically, that keeps everyone safe and secure, no matter how big or small their country is. We must understand that terrorism isn't just about groups like Al-Qaeda. It can come in different forms. We should listen to what most people in the General Assembly want when making decisions. If the majority votes for something, we should follow it. No one should think they're better than the General Assembly. If they do, they shouldn't be part of the United Nations. Democracy isn't just for the rich or powerful. It's for everyone. Right now, the Security Council acts like a group of powerful rulers, protecting their own interests and using their power against us. It's unfair. We shouldn't let ourselves be controlled by this unfairness and terror. The Security Council was supposed to keep us safe, but instead, it has caused fear and suffering, especially for poorer nations. They use their veto power to protect themselves and scare others. We've had enough of it. After today, we won't blindly follow Security Council decisions anymore. In the past 40 years, there have been 65 wars, some between small countries and others caused by powerful nations attacking us. The Security Council did nothing to stop them, even though it's against their own rules. It's time for change. The General Assembly will vote on important decisions that could change history. Gaddafi made a strong point that if each nation had its own version of the General Assembly and the Security Council with equal power, the countries currently holding permanent seats would only have authority over themselves. Whether there are 3 or 4 of them, they would need to settle their disputes among themselves without affecting others. He emphasized that their desire to keep their permanent seats doesn't concern him. He refuses to be controlled by them or their veto power, which was granted unfairly. Gaddafi argued against giving superpowers the right to veto decisions, as it allows them to treat other nations poorly. He pointed out that these superpowers were not appointed by everyone and shouldn't act on behalf of all nations. Gaddafi stated that they were ignoring Security Council resolutions because they were unfairly targeted at them, not the superpowers with permanent seats and veto power. This misuse of resolutions has made the United Nations ineffective, leading to conflicts and violations of sovereignty, including war crimes and genocide. According to Gaddafi, all of this goes against the United Nations rules. Because no one pays attention to the UN Security Council, each country and group has started making its own versions. This has made the UN Security Council feel isolated. The African Union, the European Union, Asian countries, and soon Latin America and 120 non-aligned nations were all creating their own security councils. This showed that they'd lost trust in the UN Security Council because it hadn't kept them safe. That's why they're making new regional security councils. They won't follow the rules or decisions of the UN Security Council because it's not fair or democratic. No one can make them join or follow its orders in its current form. Also, there's little respect for the United Nations as a whole, especially the General Assembly, which represents everyone, but its resolutions aren't enforced. International courts only target smaller or poorer countries, while powerful ones get away with breaking the rules. Even agencies like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, are biased against them. Gaddafi suggested that if the IAEA isn't truly international, they should shut it down. He called for the President of the General Assembly to talk to the IAEA's director and demand equal treatment for all countries regarding nuclear energy inspections. Gaddafi stated that if the director of the agency agreed to inspect all countries with nuclear power, then they would accept its authority. But if he claims he can't inspect certain nuclear-powered countries, then they'll shut down the agency and refuse its authority. Gaddafi recounted calling the director when Libya faced nuclear issues. He questioned whether the agency oversees nuclear reductions agreed upon by superpowers and monitors any increases in their nuclear activities. However, the director couldn't compel superpowers to undergo inspections, raising concerns about the agency's fairness. Gaddafi emphasized Africa's need for a permanent seat on the Security Council, regardless of UN reforms. He argued that Africa endured colonization, isolation, and exploitation of its people and resources, deserving recognition and representation. He urged the General Assembly to prioritize this issue and questioned anyone opposing it. Additionally, he called for compensation for colonized countries to prevent future injustices. Gaddafi questioned why people from Africa, Asia, and Latin America migrate to Europe. He explained that it's because these regions were once colonized by European countries, who exploited their resources and people. Now, descendants of those colonized nations seek to reclaim what was taken from them. Gaddafi shared an encounter at the Libyan border where he stopped African migrants heading to Europe. They desired to retrieve their stolen wealth, indicating they wouldn't leave otherwise. He argued that if the stolen wealth were restored, migration from these regions would decrease significantly. Gaddafi demanded $777 trillion in compensation for Africa from former colonial powers. He emphasized that Africans can pursue this wealth and bring it back to their homeland. Gaddafi highlighted an example of reconciliation between Libya and Italy, where Italy acknowledged its wrongdoing during the colonization of Libya. They agreed to compensate Libya with $250 million annually for 20 years and to build a hospital for those injured by World War II mines. Italy's apology and commitment to avoid future colonization were praised. He concluded by stating that demanding compensation from colonizers serves as a deterrent against future colonization. It holds powerful countries accountable for their actions and discourages them from repeating history. He insisted that countries responsible for colonial harm must compensate for the suffering inflicted during that time. Before addressing a sensitive issue, he expressed pride in an African, Barack Obama, becoming the President of the United States. It's a historic milestone considering the past racial segregation in the country. However, he expressed concern that after Obama's term, progress might regress. He wished Obama could lead forever, as his approach differs from previous American presidents. He contrasted Obama's approach with past presidents who threatened other nations with military force. They used terms like Desert Storm, Grapes of Wrath, and Rolling Thunder as intimidation tactics. Gaddafi recounted instances like the Vietnam War and conflicts in Iraq and Egypt, where American intervention caused harm. Despite having a permanent seat on the Security Council, they failed to protect nations like Libya. Instead, they used advanced weaponry against them, prioritizing dominance over peace. Gaddafi praised Obama for advocating nuclear disarmament, a departure from the aggressive stance of previous American leaders. He also emphasized that America alone couldn't solve all the world's problems. It required global cooperation. He urged for more action rather than just speeches, which he agreed with and applauded. He criticized the tendency for nations to come to the United Nations and argue against each other instead of communicating equally. Furthermore, he agreed with the notion that democracy shouldn't be forced upon nations from outside. He pointed out the hypocrisy of past American presidents who advocated for imposing democracy on countries like Iraq. He believed that true democracy must come from within a nation, not from external pressure. Consider the vast differences across the world, Gaddafi said. Should we tolerate such extremes? Why can't nations be on equal footing? These are questions that need answers. Why do we accept hierarchies like patriarchs, popes, or gods? We reject a world of extreme divisions and advocate for equality, where both big and small nations have the same standing. He went further to talk about the location of the United Nations. Number 5. Addressing accessibility and security concerns. Gaddafi highlighted the fact that many attendees traveled long distances, crossing oceans and continents just to be here. Is it fair that this meeting place is so far for so many? Shouldn't it be easier and more comfortable for everyone to access? Some of us are struggling with jet lag and tiredness from the journey. Why do we continue with this arrangement, made back in 1945? Moreover, we need to acknowledge the responsibility placed on the host country, America. They cover the costs and ensure the safety of the headquarters and visiting leaders. Let's recognize their efforts and lighten their load. We should express gratitude to America for their hospitality and collaboration in maintaining the safety and tranquility of this meeting place. There's a genuine threat from groups like Al-Qaeda, as shown by their past attacks. It's essential to take precautions to prevent any future tragedies. He suggested that it's unpredictable what might happen in the future. Perhaps America or the UN might become a target again, and many leaders could lose their lives. Gaddafi said, "We want to ease America's worries by relocating the UN headquarters to a safer location. After being in the Western Hemisphere for 50 years, it should move to the Eastern or Middle Hemisphere for the next 50 years, rotating every half-century. Currently, the headquarters has been in the Western Hemisphere for 64 years, exceeding the intended duration. This proposal isn't meant to offend America, but to serve it better. We should express gratitude to America for its cooperation in 1945, but it's time to reconsider the location." Of course, this decision should be put to a vote in the General Assembly, as stated in Section 23 of the Headquarters Agreement. If 51% of the Assembly agrees, the headquarters can be relocated. While America has the right to tighten security due to terrorist threats, we don't agree with all these measures. Presidents have faced restrictions on their entourage's movements, such as co-pilots and honor guards, due to visa issues or misunderstandings. These strict measures can make delegations feel as if they're in prison, rather than participating in the United Nations. Gaddafi continued, "This proposal will be presented to the General Assembly for a vote. If 51% agree, then a second vote will determine whether to relocate the headquarters to the middle or eastern part of the globe. If we decide on the Middle Hemisphere, why not consider cities like Sirte or Vienna? These places are easily accessible and you don't even need a visa to enter once you become a president. Libya is a safe country, and we wouldn't impose any restrictions. The same applies to Vienna. If the vote leans towards the eastern part, logical options would be Delhi, Beijing, or the capital of India. I believe this decision would be widely accepted, as it would eliminate the inconvenience of long flights. Nobody should assume that America will reduce its contributions to the United Nations because of this decision. America is committed to its international obligations, and we should appreciate its efforts. Despite being targeted by terrorists, America will surely appreciate the relief from the hardships and restrictions associated with hosting the headquarters." Next, Gaddafi talked about issues to be discussed by the General Assembly. Number 6. Identifying the root causes of conflict. "This is not an ordinary gathering," Gaddafi said. "It's historic." Even President Obama acknowledged its significance. We need to examine the wars that occurred after the United Nations was established. Why did they happen? Where were the Security Council, the Charter, and the United Nations during these conflicts? Investigations and judicial interventions are necessary. Those responsible for causing wars and wiping out lives should be held accountable and made to pay compensation. For example, let's look at the Korean War that happened after the United Nations was formed. How did it lead to millions of casualties, and why weren't nuclear weapons used? Those accountable for starting the war should face trial and be forced to make compensations for the damages. Similarly, we need to revisit the Suez Canal crisis of 1956, where 3 countries with permanent seats and veto power in the Security Council attacked a member state of the General Assembly. These incidents need thorough investigation and justice. Gaddafi highlighted a concerning incident where Egypt, a sovereign nation, was attacked because it sought to nationalize the Suez Canal. This raises questions about the effectiveness of the United Nations in preventing such conflicts. Gaddafi emphasized the need to address past wrongs and reopen files like those of the Suez Canal and the Korean War. He also mentioned the Vietnam War, which resulted in 3 million casualties in just 12 days, with more bombs dropped than in 4 years of World War II. Despite the UN's commitment to peace, such devastating conflicts persist, threatening the future of humanity. As members of the General Assembly, we must ensure that such tragedies do not occur again. Additionally, Gaddafi spoke about the attack on Panama, an independent UN member, where thousands lost their lives and the president was unlawfully imprisoned. This raises concerns about the actions of member states, especially those with permanent seats on the Security Council. Furthermore, Gaddafi discussed the desire for democracy in the Middle East, contrasting it with the prevalent rule of Islamic Sharia law. He argued that democracy aligns with Islamic principles and should be embraced by Middle Eastern leaders. This reflects the evolving aspirations of Middle Eastern societies for democratic governance. He emphasized that there was a time when democracy and Islam coexist harmoniously. The laws and governance were flawless, guided by Sharia law. According to him, Islam is inherently perfect and has been divinely perfected by Allah, as described in the Quran. However, he noted that it's human behavior that often complicates matters. Here's what some notable individuals from the Middle East have to say about Gaddafi. Jay Krishnan, speaking on November 11, 2019, suggests that democracy can be used as a tool for the West to influence the Middle East, likening it to propaganda. Despite being in the 21st century, he believes that Islam remains a timeless religion. He criticizes the West for blaming Gaddafi for the plane crash and accuses America, Britain, and France of worse actions than Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. Samuel C. Carpenter, on July 28, 2019, praises the hospitality and politeness of Arab countries and friends. However, he points out that some Jewish individuals can be offensive due to their beliefs, although he acknowledges their drive for success. Ibrahim Fani, on May 27, 2018, expressed regret over the loss of their leader, proposing that the West has exploited them for resources, leaving them in poverty under the guise of democracy. He reminisced about the days under the previous regime when life was more prosperous. Gaddafi also emphasized the importance of protecting citizens worldwide and providing vaccinations free of charge, particularly for children and women. He criticized the Ottawa Convention on landmines, arguing that they could be defensive weapons if used to protect borders. He called for the modification or annulment of the treaty to allow for the use of anti-personnel mines for defensive purposes. Regarding the Palestinian situation, Gaddafi believed that the two-state solution is impractical due to the overlapping populations and territories. Instead, he advocated for a democratic state without religious or ethnic divisions as the solution. What are your thoughts on Gaddafi's speech? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.